Hello, welcome back to one of these merging webinar series. Today we're going to talk about Ovation, specifically in AV installs, museums, and things like that. So basically a system that needs to be designed or a show that needs to be designed, but when it's designed, it wakes up on its own automatically, and for the day, for the show, for whatever, it could be triggered by somebody, a guide or somebody who, whatever, opens the place, but very non-technical person, and it falls asleep at night. Or it can be done fully automatically. We're going to see both cases. Before starting, I have a new microphone, so the sound will be better, much better now. I could go out last week, buy a new microphone, and so this issue being solved about not so great sound last week is better now. Anyway, we have a live chat, so if you have questions, if you have a remark, or if technically something doesn't work properly, do not hesitate to type a message, and I will try to respond to it as good as possible and as quickly as possible. Great. I'm gonna make myself a little bit smaller. Thank you, Dennis. That it sounds better. I hope so. I'm gonna make myself a little bit smaller so that we can start looking at it. Whoops, like this. I'm gonna put myself here on this corner for the moment and move myself to the other side later on. Great, good. So what I have here is basically a project and that I prepared and explain you a little bit what my idea is about this project, trying to emulate a real life situation. So the idea is that, first of all, I have an audio mixer in my Ovation, and this audio mixer, we're going to come back, or I'm going to come back later during this webinar about it specifically, but just to explain quickly the concept and the idea. I have, let's say, a museum or an event place where I have different zones. And those zones could be triggered with stereo signal, and those zones could be triggered with multi-channel signal. So here on the complete right, I have an immersive zone with multi-channel. Then I have 3 stereo zones, okay? And I have a now stereo. This is basically when I play something back. This is basically what we hear via YouTube and what I do here over my headphone. But of course, it could be a 4th zone, let's say. Let's describe it. And then I have one group that it's called event, because in my museum we have several zones where things go on that have different length and different things that are triggered sometimes by presence of people or whatever. But we also have events taking care in the lobby, for example. And when those events take care, there's somebody with a microphone explaining something, and that means that all the other zones need to have this this audio carried to this zone while dimming what's going on in this zone actually. So the film or whatever, it's continuing, but the audio is dimmed and we hear the voice from the lobby. So people rather gather to the event if you want so. And then on the left side, I have my different strips. So I have 2 mono channels. One that is an input from something, the other one is an input from a microphone. And I don't have a microphone now coming in, but I will have a sound generator, so I will have some signal coming in. And then I have a few stereo channels and 2 5-1 channels. So something very basic. And now I'm going to show how I can set up some audio cues and some controlling cues, and then manage all of this together and send the audio, obviously, into the mixer, into the different zones. So for the moment, I'm going to close the mixer, and I'm going to explain you what I have here in front of me. And I shared my screen into 3 parts, if you wish. My part 1 on the left are different types of cue lists. And basically those cue lists are lists. I can build them up here. Cue list, new, open, save, and close. Standard cue list, time cue list, hotkey cue list, custom key cue list, and hot browser cue list. And basically I can build up as many as I want, and then I throw stuff in there. So in terms of audio, it is very straightforward. I open my browser and I can drag and drop whatever. Yes. there actually it asks me, do I want to convert it in terms of the sample rate? And it's going to ask me again. And I say, no, I'm going to do that later. So to show you that I can drag and drop different sample rates, it will read it, it will SRC it real time. I can drag and drop different formats, compressed formats like MP3, AACs, and so on, or FLAC files, and also uncompressed formats like WAVE, IFF, PMF, broadcast wave, and so on. It's just transparent. I don't need to think, to care, to whatever. Also different resolutions, 16-bit, 24-bit, and so on. I just drag and drop it. And also some multitrack. I have some multitrack material here. So I can just drag and drop from drives, network drives, from whatever I want. It just happily reads it straight away. And this is my first cue list. And the idea is that I will read my Q1, my audio Q1. I see it's audio because it has a speaker there. Once this is finished, I will read my audio Q2. I read my audio Q3, and I can read my audio Q4 afterwards. So this is the classic, what we call standard cue list, reading one cue after each other. And you see while going through those cues, each time in the middle part of my screen, I see that the waveform changes because here I have what we call the active cue window where I see the full audio of my cue. And I can say, if I click there, it will play it. And I could say, let me take something a bit more obvious. Let's say I want to start it actually from the second kick and not from the beginning of the song. Well, I'm just a bit next to it, so I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to say I'm going to start it from there. It's that one. And I can make a little fade and even make it a bit closer. So I each time have a little editor for each cue, either mono, stereo, multitrack, or whatever it is, that I can edit and prepare it. And now basically it is stored. I have nothing to do. Okay, I can run to the next cue and edit it. If I go back to that one, this is properly done the way it should be. And of course, the end can also be triggered and faded if needed. Okay. So each of these queues can be separately worked out and moved on. Another very important thing I have in my medium window, or the way I arranged it, my central window, is the audio gain matches. That means now, as you could see before, I have a stereo file. But perhaps I want to actually spread it over to something much more larger. You remember I have an immersive section, an immersive zone. And if I want to play this file in all my speakers, we haven't seen yet what type of immersive it is, but let's say I have 12 speakers in there. I could say, okay, I want my mattress size to be 12. And now I have my stereo input 1 and 2 there of this file, or left and right if you wish. And then I have the 12 speakers on which I play it out. And I just have to then apply a different gain from each of my left and right channel, playing out on those different things. So if I play now this one, and I open my mixer, I see it plays it in many more places than just in my stereo. If I go back and I reduce my mattress again to a stereo, I see it plays it back just on file 1 and 2 and not on the rest here. All right, good. So this is something very interesting on that aspect, this audio gain mattress. Great. This is the first standard cue list. Then I have time cue list, commands, background, music, and control hotkey cue list. The time cue list is now, you see that here at the very bottom, for the moment it says 0000. This is basically the start of my show. I haven't started the show yet, but it starts at 0, or it starts at the time of the day, for example, or with an incoming time code. But for whatever reason, I perhaps would like to have a specific scene that it's timed in between precisely and that plays independently, that it's triggered from another time code, or that it's triggered at a certain moment, day of the time, and it starts. And this is the time cue list. And then in between, I can say each time when one file starts. This one will start at 5 seconds, this won't start for the moment because I haven't given any time yet. Then I have the commands. Cue list, this is basically working like the others, but where I can make big buttons and I can move them, I can give a name to them, I can give a color to them. This is in the idea that this will be the cue list that will be open to, for example, the museum guide, so that he or she can click with very basic, I mean, on a touchscreen, for example, I'm going to explain you in a second how, but that he can start or stop the show very easily, very pragmatically, without any technical skills or background on that aspect. Then I have a hotkey browser. This is basically in the idea that I have a folder that I pointed here, and then I change different musics in there that I can change every month or whatever. And this will randomly play the music, for example, in the lobby, just something very quiet, nothing to do with actually the museum in the sense of a presentation. It's just to have some background music playing. And then what I have here is basically what we call a hotkey playlist. This is in the idea that there would be an operator uh, to launch those different queues. And I made it that way that it could be, for example, for the events moment, that there comes in an operator each time that, for example, opens the microphone of the person who speaks and launches different things. And you see here, I named them launch MIDI 1, launch GPO, launch IP. This is basically then to show you the interaction with different controls of items that are not in Ovation, but that are provided by other devices. For example, switching the light on, or moving a curtain, or starting a video, or all this type of different things. Good. I move now on the right side of my screen, where I have here three very important windows. And again, this is the way I set it up. You can, of course, set it up differently, but I found it for the presentation purposes interesting to set it up that way. And I'm going to move my little video, my little screen capture of myself to the left side so that you can fully see what's happening on there. First of all, I have the show properties. The show properties are basically the properties of the entire show that like here, I say show, save as, open, and so on. So there are a few important things to understand. The first thing is that I can put a password in there. So it means I can password protect my show so that my Ovation running from a technical room somewhere in the lower floors, nobody can change or move around the show unless they have the password. So this is the first security. Then the second thing, which is very important here, is that I can auto start the show. That means that, remember, we are in a museum, so it wakes up in the morning and goes to sleep at night, and starts alone on the morning and stops at night. So that means that when I auto start the show, my computer will boot up in the morning with a rule, and then it will auto launch Ovation and start the show. And I can delay the start of the show by a few seconds. So in the idea that all the other interactivities that Ovation is connected to, remember, to light, to perhaps opening curtains, to IP devices for video and so on, have also the time to wake up and to receive the first triggers. So to make sure that everybody is alive, everybody is ready, we have this little delay launch of a few seconds, and then we start the show so that everybody is stabilized and is happy to receive the first information for the entire day. Then I have also the possibility to use the time of the day, typically as a reference. So at 2 o'clock, there is this zone, something is happening, at 3 o'clock in the other zone. So this is my timeline, so to say, and my time of the day where I can then trigger different things dependent on that. Then I have many other options, but for the moment, that's what I want to say here. Then I have queue list property. So obviously, every of these queue lists has specific properties. First of all, the name. I can change colors and so on. And then I can decide a bit more things, for example, linked to the mixer. You see at the very bottom here, it says audio output slot. So it says that now this standard queue list, I could define that this queue list specifically plays only from one audio strip and not the others. Okay, so I don't need to manage this within each queue, I can do it for the entire list. But then I can do it also for the entire queue. And this what brings me to the queue properties. Now, each queue has individual queue properties. So the first one being, I don't like the name of this Rocco's place, whatever. So I gonna call this ridden beat, whatever, and so it renames it. Okay. Then of course I can also change the color because I prefer to have it like a kind of a bluish, whatever, because it needs to be blue on that aspect. But more importantly, I could say that, let me move that here on the top. I could say that when I play this one, I would like that it starts my time queue list. Okay, and for that we're gonna use what we call interaction rules, because when I click this, it's gonna start my time queue list and it's gonna start its own reference in terms of its time queue list when the different queues inside will play. I say interaction rule, the three dots opens me my window to manage my interaction rule. So here I can say that I can stop, pause, dim, fire, select, fire, not the next queue. That could be fire when it ends and fire when it ends and so on. But here I want to fire the time queue list when starting. With a fade if I want or not, add rule. I say okay, and you will notice now next to the speaker, I have this little exclamation mark, which basically tells me, be careful, there's a rule. Okay, so I have an overview constantly about it. So when I now initialize my show and I start my show, and the first thing I'm gonna do, you see that the time queue list is quiet. And here nothing plays, nothing happens. As soon as I will start this guy, it will start my time queue list. And one thing we haven't seen, this will start at 5 seconds. This has been pre-programmed. So I'm gonna stop all of that and come back to explain a little bit more. Now, the thing is that this one starts at the beginning, or the very beginning of my clip. But I'm like, actually, I don't want it at the beginning. I want it at 15 seconds. And now on this queue, sorry, on that queue, I want it a bit further here. And I decide here to add a marker. And this marker has now the possibility under here, marker interaction. And actually, I'm gonna say here, start the time queue when starting. Boom. Because this one, I want to remove it. Okay, so I start my show again, just to show you the idea and the concept. So, sorry, start the show. I start that. And this starts to play now. And when it's going to reach this marker 1, it will play. I can pin it so that we can see it. Sorry, lock it so we can see it. And now it's going to reach the marker 1. And when it reaches the marker 1, it will start my queue list. Boom. And now this queue list is started. And this will play at 5 seconds. Now, okay? So obviously I can put here a second marker on this standard queue list there. I'm just gonna unlock it here so that we can see it moving around. And now I'm gonna say add marker. And for example, by double clicking on the marker, it also opens me my interaction rule manager. I'm gonna say fire queue, whatever, number 17 when starting with a little fade. I know this is a queue where there's some audio on there. So I can start actually make my queue into a timeline, okay, where I can now fix different things happening throughout the time through this very queue. Now, this is the interaction rule side that we've seen here. If I go now a little bit lower in this queue properties, I then see that I have, for example, time queue. This is closed here. But if I go to my time queue list, I see that here it is open and it tells me 5 seconds. So this is where I set the go time in a time queue list. So if I go to the multi-track that I have here, for the moment it's manual, but I can say, okay, I want this one to play at 10 seconds. And now it says here 10 seconds. The same thing with the hotkey. If I go to the hotkey queue list, I can now say here hotkey mode, play from start, toggle play stop, toggle play pause, depending of how for the operator I gonna launch the different buttons. We said it's a museum, so it's not gonna be there's not gonna be an operator just on Saturday when there's an event or whatever, but you can decide it. Then I can change again the colors, the size, all of that, what I've done there. But if I go a bit more down, I'm going to close this to gain some space. I have the audio. I have the audio slot. Remember, this is where, on which strip I'm going to play out this very cue. For the moment, it plays out on A1. So it means it plays here, but it's a stereo file, audio file. And it plays on two mono tracks. These are two mono tracks. And then I have stereo tracks, and then I have 5-1 tracks. So each of this track counts, sorry, each of this channel counts for one slot. So a mono is 1, and a stereo is 2, and a 5-1 is 6. So if I want this audio written beat playing back on, for example, my stereo track number 4, I have to count 1, 2 slots, 3, 4 slots, number 5. So if I give in number 5, always from the left to the right. So if I give in number 5 and I play it now, it's going to play back on this strip. Okay? So there individually, I can design or decide on which strip I'm going to play back. This is going to be important because it's through those strips that I can, for example, sum things, but it's through those strips that I can also decide to which bus in which zone my audio will be played. Okay? And for the moment, if I play it there, this is kind of this brownish, I should perhaps change color, but I see this is zone 1. So this is this guy here playing that we don't hear because I haven't connected into my YouTube. But if I want it also to play it into our ears, I will say now ST, which is my feed to the YouTube. And I have it there. Okay. So I have constantly this choice of moving it around the way I want. Good. I close my mixer because I want to go now further down here. So this is about my audio. This is also if I just can, for example, diminish and say minus 40 Bs on the audio and so on. This is all non-destructive, so the media remains where it is in the original format where it is. And then very interestingly, down here, I can connect all this rhythm one or rhythm beat, sorry, cue to many controls of it. So I could open a microphone. We're going to see that in a second, you will understand. But I could generate timecode with it. It means when I launch it, I generate a certain timecode. And then I decide the output, where it is, and so on. You see that now I did it on LTC1, it adds this little watch there, this little clock telling me, be careful, I launched something. So this is not only an audio cue, it's an audio cue that will trigger something timed related, obviously some timecode generated. And if I remove it, I can remove it again. So it always has a very good feedback in what those things are doing. MIDI machine control, MIDI command. So here I can put up a MIDI with this you will all be familiar to, for example, note on, note off, a program change and all these type of things. And now I see here a little MIDI logo to tell me, be careful, this guy now is also doing some MIDI, or also doing some MIDI because I removed the LTC generator. Sony EP2, I have COM commands, and then very interesting, I have IP and OSC commands. So that means that I could hook it up to a video server, for example, over IP, so that it plays, when I launch this audio, it will play this video file at the same time. I can do that with MIDI, obviously, as well. But today, in modern times, I would rather do it via IP, as it is more flexible and could do many more things with it. Or via OSC, one or the other. And then I can automate my OSC. And then below, I can also add some some GPO. We're talking about outputs here. So GPO on a certain bus, and then I can decide how this behaves if I go up, down, and so on. And I have now this kind of I call it a radiator symbol, but it's actually a GPO symbol so that I know it's linked to a GPO. And below, I have a shell command and a script. This is then interesting. I have some codes, for example, to shut down the computer at a certain time. or to do things or to restart the computer at a certain time. This is my shell command where I can create rules about this. Then I have my mixer automation, obviously automating entirely my mixer direct control also, where I can apply different things to the mixer. And then down here, I have my remote control, this time the other way around. So I can be controlled via MIDI and via IP and via OSC. And last but not least, at the very bottom, we have a special integration already made or pre-prepared, so to say, with Dataton Watchout to be able, with this device, to connect directly over IP, but so that there's no preparation in terms of making sure that all the things are on the same network and so on. Once it's connected, it sees each other and you can connect it straight away on that aspect. Great. So these are all the cue properties that you will find for each individual cue. So that gives you a lot of programming possibility and a lot of creative aspects that you can put into there to be able to do that. So let me go now a little bit further. We said we're going to launch this guy. That's going to play this one. And at the same time, it's going to play number 17 here. Okay. But at the same time, you remember we have these events on Saturday where there's a microphone input. So what I created a generator that I'm gonna now switch on. And this generator is actually via an internal bus connected to this physical input. I did that way because now for presentation purposes, it was just easier. But obviously this represents a real microphone input, okay? And so now what I will do is that with this cue here, that is called open microphone, I set that on the right side here, I have to move the mixer a little bit, yes. On the right side here, it will open microphone input 2. So slot number 2, it will open the input. And when I will do that, you will see this. I put it there. And on the top of it, here, when I open this microphone, I would like actually that all my other audio is dimming. So I set an interaction rule that will say dim, all cues when starting. And let's make a nice fade of 1 second. Let's make a nice fade out of 1 second. And let's make a dim value of 30 or rather minus 30 dBs. So I can add a rule. Now, the interesting thing, you also say that we have conditions. So I could add the rule and this will be applied. But let's say if there's a specific audio playing back, for example, the alarm track or whatever, I could then say only if this one is playing, it wouldn't, the rule wouldn't be active on that aspect. Good. So now it added this exclamation mark telling me I have a rule. So let's start the show. Initialize show. Start the show. And I'm going to start my first thing here. And it's going to play on this one. You remember I have now this guy after 10 seconds, 15 seconds, I don't remember. It will start its cue lists. And when it starts its cue list, I have just to check when it will start it like this. When it reaches, now it's reaching it. And it starts at 5 seconds. My audio here will play. There we go. And then at 10 seconds, this one is playing back. This is a multi-track channel. Okay, good. Now I will have my event on Saturday. And on Saturday, I will now open this microphone. And this is now an operator. Again, it could be automized, but it's an operator opening the microphone, letting my noise coming in, dimming all the rest, and then I remove it, and then it cuts the mic again and it's undoing the dim that I applied. So this is how you can really easily construct a show and add bit by bit the different possibilities. Coming to the mixer. My mixer now, I'm just going to disable this generator. To the mixer now, I obviously have here 2 mono strips, 4 stereo strips, and 2 5/1 strips. And I have those buses, as I said, those different zones that I created. So I see that my bus number 1 goes in all the zones. So whatever I feed in here will go in all the zones. My bus number 2, which is my microphone, on which, of course, I haven't done it here, but I could add some EQ, some dynamic, because I want some limiter and so on, because I want to have a bit compression on my microphone input, for example. This one is connected and sent to this purple one. And this purple one is actually what we call a group bus. So it is a send return inside the bus, and then it sends it to all the buses as well. But so I could send several microphones, for example, to one master bus. Okay, and so I would have a master plugin and a master fader over this bus that is then fed to all the rest. And then I have this stereo strip, which is sent to the light blue, then to the light brown, then to the green, and then to the kind of pinky. But of course, clicking on there, I could also send this one to several zones. I can really manage this then as I want on that aspect. And then here on this, let me just play that one so we can see it. This is now here my multitrack. There's not much going on for the moment. And this is now sent to my immersive. Okay. The interesting thing is that I created, to prepare this, no, sorry, it's dead. This is a 5.1 strip. I have a 5.1 content, and I prepared actually a 11.1 bus. So it means that with my panner, I have my 5.1 content that I can move around in my 11.1 structure bus. So this is view from the top, and this is view from behind. I can go up and I can go down. But I can add some divergence in 3D. And so that I have a proper mixture spreading my signal, my 5.1 signal, all over my 11.1 speaker room devices, so I don't need to do a premix. But there you would say, okay, but this is cute and nice, but actually we don't have an 11.1 type of room where precisely those things can be set up where they are, like in a professional auditorium. We have a weird sized room, and we have we have the space for one speaker there and one speaker there, and actually we can put like 10 speakers, not more. And we have specific angles, and we have to design those speakers and the sound to these angles in that aspect. So the cool thing is that here I can create a new bus, and I can specifically design the room the way I want it. General mixing bus. I create one. So you see here, I can create auxes with groups and so on and so on. And I can create from mono to 30.2 with ambisonic up to the 7th order. But what is my interest here is to create a custom one. Numbers of channels, we said, I remember we said 8 or 10, let's say 10 channels. Okay, 10 sources, 10 speakers. And then either I put it virtual, so this is basically to emulate a 7.1.4, this type of things, more in a post-production environment. And here, sized, this is where in meters, not in inches, in meters, I design the size of my room. Create, so 25 meters, for example, which is roughly 75 foot or feet. And now here, I'm gonna give a color, change color so that you understand. Let me put this one there. So now this color, and I'm gonna set this mix, send this mix in here and not in the immersive mix anymore. So now this custom mix, I have to design it. I click on custom, and this is the table where I say which source or which speaker is where. First of all, number one, I can give a name to it, left, but I could also say it is the speaker, next speaker, left to window. And then I say in XYZ metrical form in my 25 meter environment where it is. This is at minus 20 meters, and you're going to see that it's going to go on the left, but it's not completely on our height, it's a little bit higher. So it's at 2 meters, rather minus 2 meters height. Okay, and then Z, the deepness, it is at 12. Okay, and then I can start really to build up my room environment by giving those different regulations in here. 23, and I'm just gonna do 5 or no, not 5 or 6, 3, so that we can see how this behaves all together. -8 and 25. There we go. So now I made 3 speakers and all the others are still on the top of each other. Okay, and I can modify it, I can save it, I can recall it and so on if I want to. Now the cool thing is that my mixer, my 5.1 audio is now spread through those 4, for the moment 4, designed spots in the speakers. So I can move it in case I want to create a movement, move it around, but I can really emulate it and listen to it properly during the design. So that when this is designed, it perfectly fits to the room. On the top of it, of course, on the output, I can add some plugins, some EQ, some compressor, or some limiter also. First of all, to save my speakers if needed, but also to correct some odd situations in my room or whatever with an EQ. So obviously, you see that this mixer is very versatile. The way you can design it, the way you can manage it, you can automate it and so on, but we're not going to come to that for the moment. What I wanted to show on the top of it, which I think is relevant typically for a museum, once you design the show, once you prepare the show, you then want to what we call packet. We can package the show. That means that for the sound designer or the engineer who does this work, he or she then can pack it into one folder, all the information. So it means all the information that are linked to the audio, that are linked to, yes, the audio itself and the show, of course, but then all the triggers with the GPO, the MIDI, the IP, and so on, are also saved in this show. So the commands with it. And then what is important is that I can validate the show. So the show validator is a little tool that will run through my show and tell me before starting the show, be careful, we don't find mini channel 5 that is whatever the light in zone 5 because for whatever reason it has been switched off so that I can validate the show before launching it. So obviously, when it runs on its own, you're not going to do that every morning. But when you prepare it, when you install it, that can be done that way. And then very important is that you have a log file so that you see what happened. And last but not least, you have here the possibility to duplicate the show on another computer. So it means once you pack the show, you can copy it on 2 Ovation devices and then you mirror them. So you say, this is Ovation 1, which is my master, and this is Ovation 2, that is the slave. And they will both do the same things at the same time. In case one fails, you can switch off to the other. So for a museum, obviously, a problem that the show stops shouldn't happen. But it is not that dramatic, perhaps. But for theme parks, where we're very active with, we always have 2 mirrored ovations because then there are often 500,000 or even more people attending to the show, and it cannot stop. Also for security reasons, because then people start to panic or whatever it is. Last but not least, you remember that I was talking about the person who was coming in the morning and who was perhaps either automatically the show starts or perhaps a guide coming in a room and wanting to start a specific zone or a specific show when he or she enters in multi-language or not or whatever. So I created this this cue list that you can design the buttons the way you want, and you link them by an interaction rule to any cue or whatever to any show. And then with my IP address of the computer, what I've done, I can emulate the IP addresses here. I can emulate my Ovation cue list. And this obviously can stick now sorry, I just lost it. I'm just going to bring it forward again. That can be shown on a touchscreen or on an iPad via Wi-Fi or whatever. It's a web browser. And so I can hide some information, obviously. I would hide the start the show and the do whatever, but I can start the show over here and I can stop the show over here and I can reboot the system over here if needed. But this is then a design aspect of it. So the web browser allows me to do all the things I want. You see, I put a filter here. If I remove this filter, I can now see my entire timeline and really start the show from up there, for example. I now launch it over here, and this can be done by from a non-technical person to manage the entire system once, of course, it's prepared. This can also be password protected if I want to on that aspect. Great. I think I walked you quite a bit through the Ovation in terms of its application for museums and AV installs. You can go onto our website. You will have quite a few use cases explaining in real life what has been done. And nevertheless, if you have questions, remarks, or if you want to see some other specific aspects of Ovation, do not hesitate to contact us and to make a proposal so that we can include it, if possible, in our next webinar session that will start very early. Thank you very much and have a good evening. Bye bye.